The sky wasn't right long before the tornado formed. That's what I remembered first. Not the wind, not the thunder, not even the clouds themselves. It was the stillness between them. You know how storms usually build? Pressure rising, air shifting, everything gradually escalating into something you can feel coming. This wasn't like that. The air didn't build, it paused. Like the entire sky had stopped deciding what it was going to do. I was standing out on open land, flat, exposed. Nothing but distance in every direction. The kind of place where you can see weather coming from miles away. And I did. At first it looked normal, dark clouds gathering along the horizon, rotation starting to form in the distance, the early stages of a tornado. But something about it felt delayed, like the storm was waiting, not for conditions, for something else. I watched as the funnel began to drop, slow, too slow. Tornadoes don't descend like that. They form fast, violent, unstable. This one lowered itself with control, measured, like it already knew what exactly where it was going to touch down. And when it did, the ground didn't react the way it should have. No immediate debris cloud, no explosion of dust and shattered earth, just contact, clean, contained. That's when the wind hit, but not everywhere, only around it. The outer edges of the storm came alive, violent, chaotic, tearing through anything it could reach. But the center, the place where the funnel connected to the ground, remained wrong, too stable, too defined. Like the chaos had boundaries it wasn't allowed to cross. I took a step forward, not smart, but curiosity moves faster than fear sometimes, and the closer I got, the more obvious it became. The wind didn't behave uniformly. It accelerated around me, pulling outward, circling, building intensity. But right ahead, right at the center, there was a pocket, a space where the force dropped off, not completely, just enough to notice, like the storm had a core that wasn't fully part of itself. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was debris, something caught inside the rotation, held in place by the updraft. But debris doesn't stay centered like that. It doesn't resist the pull. It doesn't remain upright. I narrowed my focus, took another step closer, ignoring the way the wind tore past me in every other direction. And the shape became clearer, not large, not massive, human-sized, perfectly vertical, positioned exactly in the center of the funnel, where nothing should be able to hold still. I stopped moving, because something about that wasn't just wrong. It broke the idea of how storms work entirely. The rotation around it intensified. The outer winds screamed louder, but the center, where that figure stood, remained controlled, like the storm was forming around it, not through it. That's when the lightning struck. Close, too close. It hit the ground just outside the funnel, splitting the earth, throwing light across everything for a fraction of a second. And in that flash, I saw it clearly, a man, standing inside the tornado, not being thrown, not struggling, balanced, like the ground beneath him wasn't moving at all. And the moment that image logged in, the entire storm shifted. Not direction, not intensity, focus. Everything tightened slightly, like the storm had just acknowledged something. Not me, him. That's when the name surfaced, not from memory, from association. The only thing people ever had to describe something like that. Something impossible enough that it had to be turned into a story. A man who could ride storms, control them, exist where nothing else could. Something like Pecos Bill. But standing there, watching a tornado behave like it had a center it refused to disrupt, it didn't feel like folklore. It felt like I was looking at something that wasn't surviving the storm. It was the reason the storm was behaving the way it did. And the worst part wasn't seeing him inside it. It was realizing, based on how the wind changed the moment I focused on that center, that the storm wasn't just forming around him, it was adjusting. And I had just done something that made it notice where I was standing. I shouldn't have moved closer. Every instinct said the same thing. Stay back, get low, put distance between yourself and the storm. But the closer I got to the center, the less those instincts applied. That was the first real break. Because tornadoes don't let you choose distance. They take it from you. They pull, drag, tear. Everything moves toward them whether you want it to or not. But this one didn't. The outer wind still roared past me, violent and unpredictable, pushing against my body from every direction except one, straight ahead, toward the center. There, the pull dropped off, not completely, just enough that it felt like stepping into a different set of rules. I took another step. The pressure around me shifted again, less resistant, less chaos. Like the closer I got to the center point, the less storm behaved like a storm. That's when I noticed something I hadn't before. Debris. Branches, dirt, loose fragments of whatever the wind had picked up. They weren't moving randomly. They were orbiting, circling the center in tight, controlled paths. But none of them crossed into it. Nothing entered that inner space. Everything stayed just outside it, like there was a boundary, invisible, absolute. I stopped right at the edge of that shift, close enough that I could feel the difference clearly, far enough that I hadn't crossed into it yet, and for a second, everything balanced. Chaos behind me, control ahead. That's when the figure moved, not dramatically, not violently, just a slight adjustment, a shift in posture, like he had turned just enough to change orientation inside the storm. And instantly, the rotation changed with him. No direction, structure. The outer winds tightened, the orbit of debris sharpened, the entire system responded. That's when the realization hit hard. The storm wasn't just forming around him, it was reacting to him. Every movement he made, even the smallest, translated into a change in the storm's behavior. I didn't move, didn't breathe, because I understood something I didn't want to test. If the storm responded to him, what would it do if he responded to me? The thought barely formed, and then it happened. The wind shifted, not everywhere, just near me, a subtle redirection, like a current adjusting its flow. I felt it immediately, a pull, not toward the center, but along the edge, guiding, positioning. I took a step back, instinct, and the pull corrected, not stronger, more precise, like it didn't need force, just alignment. That's when I realized I wasn't being dragged into the storm. I was being placed around it, held at a specific distance, a specific angle, relative to him. The figure didn't move again, but the storm did. Small adjustments, micro corrections, all centered around maintaining that relationship between where he stood and where I was. That's when I looked directly at him again. Not just a glance this time, focused, intent. trying to confirm what I was seeing. And in that moment, the center changed, not visibly, but structurally. The calm space tightened, the boundary sharpened, like something had just locked into place, and I felt it, not as wind, as pressure, a subtle drop, like the air itself had adjusted to accommodate something new, something that wasn't part of the original system. Me. That's when the name came back again, not as a story, as the only reference people ever had for something like this. A man who could exist inside a storm, ride it, control it, something like Pecos Bill. But this wasn't the control the way people imagined it. Not force, no struggle, no dominance. It was something quieter, more precise. The storm didn't resist him. It compiled, adjusted itself continuously to maintain whatever structure he required. And now, based on how the wind was shifting around me, I wasn't just watching that system anymore. I had been accounted for inside it, positioned, measured, included. And the worst part wasn't realizing the storm was reacting to him. It was realizing, as the air pressure dropped slightly where I stood, that something inside that center had just finished adjusting to include me in whatever came next. I didn't step back this time, not because I felt safe, because stepping didn't seem to matter anymore. The wind was still there, still violent, still tearing through everything beyond that invisible boundary. But where I stood, it didn't feel like wind anymore. It felt structured, like every gust had direction, purpose, nothing random, nothing wasted. I raised my hand slightly, testing it, and the air didn't push against it the way it should have. It moved around it, clean, controlled, like it knew exactly where my hand would be before I lifted it. That's when I realized this wasn't turbulence, this was coordination. The storm wasn't just reacting to him, it was anticipating everything inside its field, including me. I lowered my hand slowly, watching the air settle back into place with precision, no delay, no overshoot, perfect adjustment. That's when the figure shifted again. This time, I felt it before I saw it. A change in pressure, not strong, but exact, like something had just rebalanced the entire system around a new position. Then I saw it. The figure had turned slightly more, not toward me fully, but enough. Enough that the center of the storm wasn't neutral anymore. It had orientation, and everything responded to it. The rotation tightened again, not faster, more precise, like the edges of the storm were being pulled into cleaner, sharper paths, and the space I was standing in shifted with it. Not physically, positionally. I wasn't where I had been a second ago, not in relation to the storm. The distance between me and the center hadn't changed, but my angle had. Adjusted, corrected, like I had been moved into a more accurate position without taking a step. That's when I understood something I hadn't wanted to accept. The storm wasn't surrounding him, it was centered on him, and anything inside its range didn't move freely. It got arranged. I tried to take a step to the side, just a small one, testing whether I still had control over my position. My foot moved, I shifted slightly, and instantly the wind compensated, not pushing me back, rebalancing around me, so that when I finished the step, I was still in the same relative position to the center, same distance, same angle, different ground, same alignment. I froze, because that wasn't movement, that was correction. The storm didn't stop me from moving, It made sure my movement didn't matter. That's when the realization hit, slow, heavy, final. This wasn't a storm I could walk around. It was a system that maintained relationships between the center and everything inside it. I looked at him again, fully this time, no hesitation, and for the first time he didn't feel distant. Not because he came closer, because the space between us had been normalized, flattened, like distance was no longer measured the way it should be. That's when the lightning struck again, closer than before. It hit the ground at the outer edge of the rotation, and for a split second, everything lit up, clear, sharp, undeniable. I saw him, not blurred, not distorted, standing upright in the core of the tornado, calm, still, and the storm was bending around him, not violently, not dramatically, subtly, continuously, like every part of it was being adjusted in real time to match something only he defined. And in that flash, something else became clear. It wasn't just that he was inside the storm, it was that the storm had no identity without him. It didn't exist independently, it existed as a response. And the moment that thought formed, the air around me tightened again, not painfully, not forcefully, just enough to confirm something had changed. That's when I felt it. No, not wind, not pressure, awareness, not mine, the system's. Like something inside that center had just finished mapping where I stood, how I moved, how I reacted, and adjusted the storm accordingly. The name surfaced again, not as comfort, not as explanation, just the closest thing people ever had to describe something like this. Something like Pecos Bill, but standing there, feeling a storm that no longer behaved like a force of nature, I understood the truth wasn't that he controlled it. It was that the storm itself was incomplete without him. And now, based on how precisely it was maintaining my position, I wasn't just observing that system anymore. I had been placed inside it, not randomly, not accidentally, exactly where something inside that center wanted me to be. And the worst part wasn't realizing I couldn't move freely. It was realizing the storm didn't need to stop me from leaving. Because no matter where I went, it would simply adjust again until I was exactly where I already was. I tried to ignore it, tried to focus on something simple, distance, direction, anything I could still control. But the storm won't let anything stay simple, not anymore, because once you notice a pattern like this, everything starts confirming it. The lightning struck again, closer, so close that the ground lit up in sharp white lines, shadows snapping into place for a fraction of a second, and in that flash I saw something that shouldn't happen. The strike curved, not dramatically, not like a bolt bending across the sky, subtle but wrong. It descended fast, straight, then adjusted at the last moment, just enough to miss the center, just enough to avoid him. I froze, because lightning doesn't miss. It follows the easiest path to ground. It doesn't hesitate, it doesn't choose. But this one corrected, and it wasn't random. The next strike came seconds later, different angle, different position, same result. It diverted, every time, just before reaching the center. That's when I looked at the space around him more carefully, not at him, at the air itself, and for a moment I thought I saw it. A slight distortion like heat rising off pavement, except this wasn't heat, it was structure. The air around him wasn't empty, it was arranged, layered in a way that redirected everything that tried to pass through it. Wind, debris, and now lightning. That's when I felt it near me, that same subtle shift, the air tightening slightly, not resisting, preparing. Another strike built overhead. I could feel it before it formed. That electric pressure, that rising charge, and for a second, I thought it was going to hit near me, close enough to feel, close enough to matter. Then it changed, not upward, not away, sideways. The bolt split, one branch continuing toward the ground, the other bending slightly, just enough to avoid the space I occupied. It hit just beyond me, close enough to feel the impact, but not on me, not through me, around me. I didn't move, didn't breathe, because something had just confirmed itself. The storm wasn't centered on just on him. It extended outward. Everything inside its system, everything it had accounted for, was being preserved, not protected, maintained. Like the storm wasn't trying to destroy anything within its structure, it was trying to keep it intact. And everything outside that took the full force. That's when the realization hit, clear, unavoidable. The storm doesn't miss, it avoids, and not randomly, precisely, based on whatever structure it's maintaining. I looked at him again, standing there, completely unaffected, as lightning bent away from him like it had been told where not to go. And then I understood the part people always get wrong. They think something like Pecos Bill controls the storm, commands it, forces it to obey, but this was in control. There was no resistance, no struggle, no dominance. The storm wasn't being overridden, it was being defined. Every force inside it, wind, pressure, electricity, all operating under the same rule set. A rule set centered on him. And now, based on how the last strike bent around me, I wasn't outside that rule set anymore. I had been included in it, not as an observer, as a variable, something the storm had to account for, position, movement, impact. And the worst part wasn't realizing the storm won't hit me. It was realizing it wasn't avoiding me for my safety. It was avoiding me to keep me exactly where I was meant to be. I stopped trying to move naturally because nothing about movement felt natural anymore. Every step I took, the storm adjusted before I finished it, not reacting, anticipating. I tested it again, slow this time, deliberate. I leaned slightly to the left, not even a full step, just a shift in balance, and instantly, the wind on that side softened. Not after I moved, before, like it already knew where I was going to be. I completed the step, and just like before, my position relative to the center didn't change. Different ground, same alignment. That's when something in my chest tightened, because this wasn't control anymore. This was prediction, and prediction means something worse than reaction. It means the system already knows that outcome. I took another step, faster this time, trying to break it, trying to create a mismatch, something unpredictable, but the storm didn't lag, didn't correct. It adjusted in advance, so that by the time I finished the movement, I was already where it needed me to be. That's when I understood the trap. It doesn't stop you from coming, doesn't stop you from moving. It removes the effect of your movement. No matter what you do, the result stays the same. You end up in the position it has already defined. I turned sharply, quick, unplanned, and for a split second, I thought I broke it. The wind stuttered just slightly, a delay, a gap, something unsynchronized, but then it snapped back, harder, cleaner, more precise than before, like it had corrected not just the mistake, but the possibility of making it again. That's when the pressure changed. Around me, subtle but deeper this time, not just air, not just wind. The entire space I occupied felt stabilized, like the storm had locked onto me fully. Every variable accounted for, every movement predicted, every outcome already resolved. I looked at the center again, at him, still standing, still unmoved, and for the first time, it didn't feel like it was watching him. I was watching him anymore. It felt like I was inside something that extended from him, like the storm wasn't the system, he was. The storm was just the visible part of it. That's when the realization settled in, heavy, unavoidable. This isn't a man riding a tornado. This is a point around which reality organizes itself. And anything that enters that system doesn't interact with it freely. It gets absorbed into the structure, defined, predicted, maintained. The name surfaced again, the only one people ever had for something like this, Pecos Bill. But that name assumes something human, something understandable, something that chooses. And nothing about this felt like choice. It felt automatic, exact, like a law. And I wasn't outside it anymore. I wasn't observing it. I was being processed by it. Every movement I made already resolved before I finished it. Every position I reached already assigned before I got there. And the worst part wasn't realizing I couldn't escape it. It was realizing I had already completed every movement I was going to make inside it. I just hadn't experienced them yet because the storm, whatever it really was, wasn't waiting for me to decide where to go. It had already decided and was just letting me catch up to the outcome. I stopped moving, not because it would help, because movement didn't change anything anymore. The storm had already accounted for that. So I listened. That's when I noticed it. The sound wasn't right, not the wind. That was still there, loud, constant, tearing across everything outside the center. But inside, where I stood, the sound didn't match the motion. The air moved around me with precision, but the noise lagged, like the storm's sound was coming from somewhere else, out of sync. I turned my head slightly, trying to track it, and the moment I did, the sound adjusted, not to match the wind, to match my focus. That's when the realization hit. The storm wasn't just controlling movement, it was controlling perception. What I heard wasn't coming from the wind itself. It was being aligned with where I directed my attention. I tested it, focused on the outer edges, the chaotic rotation. Instantly, the sound intensified there, louder, sharper, more violent. Then I shifted my focus back to the center, to him, and the sound dropped, not to silence, to something else, something deeper, lower, structured, like a rhythm beneath the chaos. I held my focus there, didn't look away, and slowly the storm began to sound different, less like wind, more like repetition, a pattern, not random noise, something with timing. That's when I felt it again, not through the ground this time, through the air itself, a subtle pulse matching that rhythm. And then I realized something I shouldn't have. The storm wasn't making noise, it was translating something I wasn't supposed to perceive directly, something too large, too complex, being reduced into sound, into something my mind could process, And the closer I focused on the center, the clearer it became. Not words, not language, but structure, repetition, consistency. Like I was hearing the system itself operate. I stepped back instinctively, just one step, and instantly the sound snapped back into chaos, wind, noise, unstructured, like I had lost access to whatever I had just been hearing. I froze because that confirmed it. There were layers to this: outer chaos for everything not included, inner structure for everything inside it, and I had crossed into that inner layer just enough to hear something I wasn't supposed to. That's when I looked at him again, and for the first time, it didn't feel like I was looking at a person. It felt like I was looking at the source of that pattern, the origin of the structure the storm was translating. And something people once tried to simplify into a story like Pecos Bill was never about a man controlling a tornado. It was about something that exists at the center of a system where chaos becomes organized and everything inside that system is forced to align with it, including perception, including sound, including me. And the worst part wasn't realizing the storm could control what I heard. It was realizing the moment I focused on that deeper pattern, it became clearer, more defined, more accessible, like something inside that center wanted me to hear it, not to understand it, but to align with it. Because once you start recognizing a pattern like that, once your perception begins to match its structure, you're not just inside the system anymore. You're becoming part of the way it processes itself. And the next time that sound pulsed, clearer than before, I didn't just hear it, I anticipated it, and that's when I knew whatever this was, it had already started synchronizing with me. Once I noticed the pattern in the sound, I couldn't unhear it. Even when I tried to focus on the wind, the chaos, the noise, that deeper rhythm stayed underneath, steady, precise, like something taking forward regardless of everything else. And then it happened. I didn't just hear the next pulse, I knew when it was coming. A fraction of a second before it arrived, my body reacted, not consciously, subtly. My breathing adjusted, my posture shifted, like I was preparing for it. Then the pulse came exactly when I expected it, and the moment it passed, something inside me felt aligned, not calm, not safe, just matched. I stood there trying to slow my breathing, trying to break whatever that was, but the next pulse came, and again my body adjusted before it hit. Smaller this time, less noticeable, but still there. That's when I understood what was happening. The storm wasn't just something I was inside, it was something I was starting to sync with. The rhythm wasn't external anymore, it was affecting internal timing, breath, balance, focus, everything that defines how you exist moment to moment. I took a sharp inhale, forced, out of pattern, trying to break it, and for a split second the system was resisted. The air tightened, the wind around me sharpened slightly like something had detected a mismatch. Then the next pulse came, stronger, cleaner, and my body connected itself automatically. Breath releasing in time with it. That's when fear actually hit, not panic, something worse, recognition. Because this wasn't something I could fight physically. It wasn't force against force, it was alignment. And once your body starts aligning with something, it doesn't feel like control, it feels like normal. I looked at the center again, at him, and for the first time, it didn't feel like I was observing a separate point anymore. The distance between us, whatever that meant now, felt irrelevant because the rhythm I was sinking to was coming from there, not the storm, not the wind, him, or whatever he actually was. The storm was just translating it, broadcasting it outward, and anything inside range, anything the system had accounted for, would start to match it automatically. I tried to step back again, just one step, and I did move physically, but the moment my foot landed, the next pulse hit, and my position, my balance, my stance, all corrected instantly back into alignment, like the system didn't need to stop me from moving. It just needed to ensure I ended up exactly where I should be after that movement. That's when it fully logged in. This isn't a storm you survive. This isn't something you escape. This is something that rewrites how you operate until you no longer function independently inside it. The name surfaced again, the only framework people ever had, Pecos Bill, but that name assumes individuality, a person inside a storm, someone separate from it, and that wasn't what I was seeing anymore. There was no separation. The storm didn't surround him, it extended him, and now, based on how my breathing had just matched the last three pulses without me choosing it, I wasn't separate either. I wasn't just inside the system. I was starting to operate as part of it. And the worst part wasn't that I couldn't stop it. It was that each pulse made it feel more natural, more correct. Like resistance was the thing that didn't belong. And alignment was what everything inside this storm was always meant to become, including me. The next pulse came, and I just didn't anticipate it. I moved with it, not a full step, not something visible, just a subtle shift, shoulders adjusting, breath sinking, balance correcting, perfectly in time. And I didn't choose it. That's when I stopped thinking it as a sound, a rhythm, because sound is something you hear. This was something you follow. Without realizing you started following it. I tried to hold still, completely still, no movement, no adjustment, just resist. The pulse built, I felt it coming, and I forced myself not to react. For a split second, everything inside me locked, muscles tight, breath held, out of sync, and then the system corrected, not violently, not forcefully, effortlessly. My body released tension exactly where the pulse hit. Breath exhaled at the right moment. Balance shifted just enough to match it. Like resistance didn't break the pattern. It just delayed my compliance by a fraction of a second. That's when I understood something worse. You don't resist this. You desynchronize briefly and then get pulled back in, stronger, cleaner, more precise. I looked toward the central gain, at him, and for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't before. He wasn't completely still, not in the way I thought. There were micro movements, subtle, barely visible, but perfectly timed. Each one matching the pulse I was feeling, not reacting to it, producing it. That's when everything snapped into place. The storm wasn't generating the rhythm, it was broadcasting it, and he, whatever he was the source. Every shift of his posture, every minimal movement, translated outward into wind, pressure, sound, lightning, everything. And now, my body was starting to mirror that structure, not consciously, automatically. The next pulse came, and my fingers moved slightly, a twitch, small but exact, matching the timing I had just seen in him. I froze because that wasn't coincidence. That was replication. I looked down at my hands, trying to stop it, trying to hold them steady. But the next pulse hit, and again, a movement. Slight, controlled, not random, like my body was learning the pattern, adapting to it, becoming more accurate with each repetition. That's when the realization fully formed, clear, unavoidable. This isn't a storm you stand inside. This is a system that copies its structure into anything within it. Breath, movement, timing, eventually behavior. I tried to step back again, one last attempt, and I did move. But the moment I landed, the next pulse hit, and my posture corrected instantly. Back into alignment, closer, more precise than before, like every attempt to break away just gave the system more data to refine me with. I looked at him again, and this time, it didn't feel like distance existed at all. Not because he came closer, because I was becoming structurally similar, aligned in timing, aligned in movement, aligned in the pattern itself. And something people once tried to describe as Pecos Bill was never a man riding a storm. It was something at the center of a system that everything else inside it eventually becomes a reflection of, not visually, functionally. And the worst part wasn't that I was starting to move like him. It was that it didn't feel wrong anymore. Each pulse made it feel more natural, more correct. Like this was how movement was supposed to work all along, and everything outside this system had just been imprecise. The next pulse came, stronger, clearer, and this time my body didn't hesitate. It moved exactly in time with it. Not resistance, no delay, perfect alignment, and in that moment, I realized something I couldn't undo. I wasn't just inside the storm anymore. I wasn't even just sinking with it. I was starting to become part of the pattern that was being broadcast from the center. I thought synchronization was the end point, that once your body matches the rhythm, it stops there. But I was wrong, because the next pulse didn't just arrive, it expanded, wider than before, deeper. Like the pattern wasn't just moving through time anymore, it was moving through everything that could respond to time. And I felt it in places I shouldn't have felt anything. Not just breath, not just movement, but intention. The decision to move before the movement itself even formed. I lifted my hand slightly, not fully conscious of why, and it rose in perfect timing with the pulse. Not after, not during, with it. That's when I realized something shifted. The rhythm wasn't just affecting me anymore, it was using me as a part of its continuation. I wasn't sinking to it, I was becoming one of the points that carried it forward. Like the system needed distributed responses to maintain its structure, and I had been added. I looked at the center again, at him, expecting resistance, expecting control. But something was different now. The storm wasn't tightening around him the way it had before. It was loosening, spreading, like the structure was no longer anchored to a single origin point. Like it was beginning to distribute itself outward through everything it had already synchronized, including me. The next pulse came, and for the first time, I noticed a delay, not in me, in him. A fraction of separation between his movement and the storm's response, small but real. That shouldn't have been possible, because everything up until now suggested he was the source, the origin, the center of control. But now, it felt like something else was happening, like the storm was no longer just expressing him, it was continuing without needing him to initiate it. and I was part of that continuation. I tried to step back again, but the movement didn't feel like escape anymore. It felt like interruption, and the system responded immediately, not by correcting me, but by accelerating the next pulse, faster than before, sharper, and my body adjusted instantly. No choice, no delay, just alignment. That's when I understood the terrifying shift. It wasn't just learning me anymore, it was propagating through me. Each response I made wasn't just matching the rhythm, it was helping maintain it, like the storm's structure had expanded beyond its center and now existed wherever synchronization had taken hold. I looked at him again, but the image of him controlling the storm was breaking apart, because control implies direction, and what I was seeing now wasn't direction, it was distribution. The pattern didn't belong to him, it was being carried by everything already inside it, including me, and something people once called Pecos Bill stopped making sense as a single figure, because if the storm no longer depended on a center, then the man in the storm wasn't the source anymore. He was just the first point it learned to stabilize around. And now I was becoming another. The next pulse came, and I didn't react to it, I completed it perfectly. And in that moment, I understood the final stage of the system. It doesn't end by stopping. It ends by no longer needing a center at all. Just repetition spread across everything inside it until nothing inside it can tell where the pattern began or who it originally belonged to. The problem with the pattern is this: once they spread far enough, they stop needing a source, and I was starting to feel that firsthand. The next pulse came, but something was off now. It wasn't just moving through me anymore, it was moving as me, not metaphorically, physically. My breathing, my posture, even the smallest muscle adjustments were no longer reactions, they were executions of something already decided. And worse, they were slightly ahead of my awareness. That's when I noticed the storm had changed again. The rotation wasn't tightening around him anymore. It was loosening outward, like the structure that had once been anchored to a single center was now being distributed across everything it had already touched, including me. I looked at him, expecting control, expecting origin, but the center didn't feel like a command point anymore. It felt like a reference point, something the system once used but no longer depended on. The wind still circled him, lightning still avoided him, but now it felt procedural, like those actions were continuing out of habit, not necessity. And that's when I saw it, a delay between his movement and the storm's response, small, almost imperceptible, but real. That shouldn't exist, because everything until now had proven the opposite, that he was the source of synchronization, but now the synchronization was continuing even when he didn't fully lead it. Like the system had learned the pattern so well, it didn't need constant input anymore. It only needed continuity, and I was part of that continuity now. Another pulse came, faster, sharper, and I felt my body respond before I even registered the timing, not matching it, completing it, like my movement was filling in a step the system expected me to take. I tried to resist again, just for a second, and the storm reacted immediately, not violently, but correctively. The next pulse arrived earlier, closing the gap I had created, not punishing me, recalibrating me. That's when it fully circled. That's when it fully clicked. This isn't a storm anymore. It's a distributed rhythm system, and everything inside it becomes a node, a carrier of timing, a continuation of structure. I looked at him again, and the idea that he was controlling anything started to collapse because control implies separation, and what I was seeing now was integration. The storm wasn't obeying him, it was expressing a pattern that had once originated there but no longer required him to sustain it. And something people once called Pecos Bill was never meant to be understood as a man riding a tornado. It was a simplification, a way to describe the first visible point where a system of extreme scale became synchronized enough for humans to notice. But what I was inside now was what happens after that synchronization spreads, after the origin stops being necessary, after the pattern becomes self-sustaining. The next pulse came, and this time I didn't just match it. I completed it so precisely that I couldn't tell whether it had come from the storm or from me. And that was the moment I understood the final truth. Once you become part of the system, there is no longer a difference between what it does and what you do. At some point, I stopped checking whether the storm was still doing anything, because the question didn't matter anymore. The rhythm was everywhere now, not in the wind, not in the sky, in structure, in how space itself seemed to expect timing before anything happened. The next pulse came, and there was no arrival to it, only completion. My body moved with it instantly, not as reaction, not as sync, as if the movement had already been stored inside me before I even decided to exist in that moment. That's when I noticed something I shouldn't have been able to notice. The center, him, was no longer producing anything new. The storm around him still moved, still rotated, still maintained the impossible balance of violence and precision, but the dependency was gone. It was continuing on its own, like a system that had learned its own rhythm so completely that the original trigger was no longer required. He lifted his arm slightly, slowly, controlled, and I expected the storm to respond, but the response came before the movement finished, not because it reacted faster, because it was no longer waiting. It already knew. That's when I understood the direction everything had been shifting toward. The center wasn't controlling the storm anymore. It was being outgrown by it. And I wasn't an observer of that transition. I was part of it. Another pulse came, and I felt something new inside it. A slight deviation, not in timing, in ownership. For the first time, the rhythm didn't feel like it belonged to him or the storm. It felt like it belonged to the system itself. Self-contained, self-sustaining, no origin point required, just repetition continuing because repetition had become its own reason. I looked at my hands. They weren't just moving with the pulses anymore. They were anticipating them so accurately that the difference between before and during had started to collapse. I wasn't following the rhythm. I was helping define its continuity. That realization should have felt like escape, but it didn't, because escape implies outside. And there was no outside anymore, just varying levels of participation. I turned my gaze back toward the center, and for the first time, it didn't feel like I was looking at something larger than me. It felt like I was looking at something that had already been integrated into a wider process, one that no longer needed a focal point to continue functioning. Something people once simplified into a story like Pecos Bill was able to human perception. But what I was inside now wasn't that moment. It was what comes after it stabilizes, after it spreads, after it no longer requires a man in the storm to justify its existence. Another pulse came, and this time, I didn't feel it arrive. I felt it already completed before I realized I had moved with it. And the final understanding settled in quietly. The system doesn't need a center anymore. It only needs participants who no longer recognize where the pattern begins, because by then it has already begun everywhere. The next pulse didn't feel like a pulse anymore. There was no build-up, no arrival, no transition, just a moment where reality seemed to agree on what it was doing and continued. I moved with it, not because I chose to, because there was no version of movement that existed outside it now. Everything had already been accounted for so many times that decision was just a delayed echo of what had already been settled. The storm was still there, in form, wind circling, sky torn open, lightning riding itself across the distance, but it no longer behaved like something separate from me. It behaved like something I was already inside the logic of. And then I noticed something that broke what was left of my expectations. The center was empty. Not gone, not destroyed, just unnecessary. The space where he had been, where everything had once seemed anchored, no longer held significance. The storm didn't collapse without him. It didn't weaken. It didn't change direction. It simply continued as if that reference point had never been essential in the first place. That's when it fully became clear. Whatever people once called Pecos Bill was never a man controlling a storm. It was the first observable moment where a system reached enough internal synchronization that it looked like control from the outside. But what I was standing inside now wasn't that moment anymore. It was what remains after the system no longer needs to be observed at all. Another pulse came, but there was nothing left to align to, because alignment was already complete. Not in a final way, in a continuous way. Like every possible variation of movement had already been absorbed into a structure that no longer required correction. I looked down. The ground was stable, the air was calm in its own way. Even the storm above felt less like chaos and more like a finished equation still being displayed. Not solving, not changing, just existing in its resolved form. And I realized something that didn't feel like fear anymore. It felt like conclusion. There was never a moment where I would step out of this, because stepping out implies separation, and nothing inside this system had separation left, only participation at different levels of awareness. The final pulse, if it could still be called that, didn't come with sound, or wind, or lightning. It came as understanding, simple, complete, undeniable. The pattern doesn't end. It doesn't collapse. It doesn't return to silence. It just stops needing anything outside itself to recognize that it is still happening. And in that realization, there was no longer a storm to escape, no center to find, no figure to blame, only a structure that had finished explaining itself and quietly continued existing without needing anyone left to notice. If you want to ensure these forgotten American legends aren't lost to time, subscribe and join our journey through the shadows of the past.